G'day everyone, I'm Patrick from Douglas Fir Design. Welcome to the workshop. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how I install drawer faces, drawer runners and drawer boxes into this cabinet. I want to show you the tricks that I use to get perfect alignment every single time and how it can make your life easier too. This cabinet is a record cabinet. It's designed to hold a bunch of records, LPs, down in the bottom and the second shelf. And then it has some drawers up the top, as well as a central lift up section in the lid, which will hinge up and down. But today, we're looking at fitting these drawers onto these runners into these cavities here. So the basic approach is fairly simple. I'm using standard steel soft close drawer runners. We need to place them on these strips here. So we need to figure out a way to get that height exactly the same across all of the drawers. And I'm going to use a piece of plywood to essentially just set that height. So I'll cut that up on the saw. We need to make sure that the front of the drawer runners is sitting at exactly the same position on all of the drawer boxes, which means that the fronts will all line up. In this case, the fronts are all inset, so I just want them to be in the same position. Once we've installed the runners to the sides, we will then be installing the other part, the internal part of the runner, onto the boxes themselves. That'll mean that the drawer box is operational. We're going to countersink some holes in the drawer box, which will allow us to fit the front in a simple and very satisfying way that I'll show you as we move along. So the basic approach that I use when I'm installing my runners, and this is the same if it's a whole section of drawers or just single drawers like this, is I use plywood spacers to set the heights. If you're doing a whole series of drawers, then you need to do the top runners first because you're going to use the largest spacers. And then you would do the next one down and the next one down after that. If you start with the lower one, the lower runner will be in the way of your spacer as you move up. So start with the top ones. We need to use a little square or something to mark the front position of each runner to make sure that the drawers are all sitting at the same position. And then we just line that line up with the front of the runners. Obviously, to install the runners themselves, we take them apart. And then we can sit the runners on that plywood spacer in line with that front line and install our screws. Right now I'm just putting 2 screws in, and the front screw I'm putting not in the tiny hole but in a slot. This means that I can move that runner up and down slightly if I need to down the track. Now my drawer faces should, in theory, be perfectly aligned because I have a trick to do that. But if when I put them on they drop slightly, having that first screw in a slot rather than a hole means I can nudge the runner up just slightly to compensate for that drop, and then reinstall the screw into a hole, which will mean that it'll be set. So it just allows you a bit more flexibility later on, and that's important to get really good, accurate results. I want the drawer box itself to sit flush with the bottom edge of the runner here. And I need to install this part here onto the drawer box itself. So what I'm going to do is figure out the distance between the bottom of the main runner that's installed in the cabinet and the bottom of the drawer runner that's installed on the box. And it's about 10 or 11 mil. What that means is that I'm going to use some 10 mil spacers to sit this runner on as I'm installing it onto my drawer box. I'll show you what I mean. So this is the side of my drawer box. This is the front. The way that I build these is pretty simple. The base is just fit into a slot, and then it's glued in, essentially. And then I can place some screws through the front. In this case, I actually did it after the glue up, and they'll never be seen because it's hidden by the drawer front itself. So this is the side of the drawer box. Like I said, I'm using some 10mm spacers, and then I'm gonna sit the runner on those spacers. I'm gonna line it up perfectly flush with the front, and then I can install the screws into the drawer box. Now, this also has slots that you can use for adjustment. It's up to you whether you use the slots in here or in the main runner. So I'm just gonna screw these straight into the main holes here. This is an oak drawer box, it's quite hard, so I will pre-drill this. The next step we're going to do is to countersink some holes on the inside of the front of the drawer boxes. I'm going to do 2 in each box. What this does is it allows us to sit a little screw in, make sure the screw's not so long that it protrudes through the face of your drawer front. So this is a 25mm screw. This drawer box is about 15mm. That'll give me about 10mm of screw into the drawer face. We are going to partially insert these screws so that about 1mm or 2mm of point sticks through the front. What that means is that we can install the drawer faces with some spacers so that the fit and the alignment is perfect. And we can push that drawer face up against that little tiny point which is poking out, give it a tap with a mallet, and that point will embed in the drawer face and give us a position so we know exactly where to drill. This is a technique that I've used on large drawers where I have, 2 stacks of 7 or 8 drawers, and it can also be used on smaller sets like this where I just have 1. But the basic principle is drill your holes first, leave a tiny bit of the pin point of the brad point of the screw poking out, use that to mark the position of the drawer fronts in the actual unit, and then drill those holes and screw the screw in. So my left-hand drawer fits really well. This one is actually a little bit tight. It's not really an issue. It's kind of less than 1mm tight on one side, not the other. So I need to taper this top ever so slightly. Now you could just do that with a hand plane. You take a pass here and then a slightly longer pass and a slightly longer pass, and you can taper down to a line. What I've done instead is I've put a tiny little spacer on the bottom edge, and I'm going to run this along the fence on the table saw just to take a 1/2mm in a very, very even, consistent taper. And the reason I do this is because it's really finely tunable by just moving the fence, and I can also adjust the angle slightly. So I'm not going to overshoot it, and I just know that I can get it right this way. So my drawer faces are sitting in the right position, and now all I need to do is get a mallet and give them a tap, which drives them into those little pinpoints of the screws that are still protruding. Then I pull everything off, drill a little hole where that pinpoint is, and then I can take the drawer off and screw the screws into the face. Now, an interesting thing to note, if you do not have a top on your case, like I do not, then you could simply screw that screw into the drawer face. But most of the time when I'm building drawers, the top's already installed, or there's a drawer on top of it, or you just can't get in there. And so this method allows you to set the exact location, even if you don't have access. Now, I often use tape to hold them in place to make sure they don't try and flop forward. Once they're all in place and you've got all your spaces exactly where you want to go, then tap each one. It works exactly the same way. It's a lot more fiddly because you've got all of these flopsy drawer fronts that aren't really attached yet, but by using blue tape, you can stop them from falling forward. You get those brad point marks in the back of your drawer fronts, you can drill them and they'll all be in the right position. And if they're not exactly in the right position, then you can move the runners up or down slightly because you've installed the screw in the slot, like I told you the first time. One of the last steps of this plan is we then have to go back to the drawer boxes and enlarge those countersink holes so that the screw thread is only engaging in the drawer front. If it's engaging in the drawer box and the drawer front, you can do it up, but there might still be a gap. You need the screw itself to float freely in the drawer box, and those threads only engage in the drawer front. So my right hand drawer now fits perfectly. The gaps all look super even to me. My left hand drawer needs some adjustment. This is the right hand one. Looks very, very consistent. It's about 1.5 mil the whole way around. This one has dropped. Maybe only I would notice it, but it's got a bigger gap at the top than the bottom. And I'm gonna fix that by taking the drawer out and adjusting those runners up a tiny bit and placing the screws in the new holes. So with a bit of adjustment, the drawer now looks perfect. The alignment is great. So now I go through and I put some additional screws in the runners so they don't move. And I'm also going to place some additional screws between the drawer box and the drawer front so that doesn't move, and everything is now set. So that's how I install drawers, drawer runners and drawer faces. I'm sure down the track I'll show you a more complicated one where I have to do 8 drawers in a stack and you'll watch them all tumble to the ground. But the process is actually the same, just a lot more awkward. Hope you got something out of it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. There's more info in the links below, and I'll see you next video. Thanks for watching.